eliminativism is a rather tricky theory. I've seen few videos talking about eliminativism lately, and I've been really displeased with the way eliminativism is portrayed by other people, and I understand it's not their fault, definitely. I mean, it's a tricky theory, and unless you have some clear concepts, it's going to sound a bit weird. So in order to explain what eliminativism is all about as a theory, I will try to do it in a very simple, plain way, nothing fancy. The key point here, and this is important to bear in mind, that philosophy of mind as a discipline comes from philosophy of language. So the entire point of this theory is the language. So we have to understand exactly what is the point of this, and the point is basically a linguistic point. So so because it's easy to say, oh, eliminativism is about like all or emotions or states are non-existent. Like there is nothing like fear, love, and emotion. All these mental states or all these sort of emotions we have, all these realities we think we have in our mind are all false or empty or whatever, and it's easy to portray eliminativism this way, but this observation is entirely wrong. It's not absolute. It's not based on what Paul Churchland and his wife Patricia Churchland talk about in the article that made eliminativism the big thing it is today. I think actually what they say is rather reasonable. Like, I wouldn't say that I am myself an eliminativist, but I would say they do have a point, and I think it's worth considering what they are saying, because I think it's a very good warning of what can happen to science unless we have a very tight grip on our own language, and so I'm going to make now a wee comparison with another chapter of our history of science. I just want you to see the point, and I think it's better represented if we move now to astronomy. Consider these two words. We have sunset and we have sunup, also dawn or dusk. So we have dawn, dusk, sunset or sunup. And we say also, we have in our vocabulary, like when we talk about our daily life, we say like the sun is rising, or like we have expressions to say, for example, waxing moon. But we know these things are not real, but we have words for it because it's like in our daily life, as it is seen by us, is what happens. What we see, I am standing here and I see the sun literally like rising, and I say sun is rising. In every language, basically, when you say sun up, usually involves the idea of like the sun going up. As well, I am Spanish, and we have amanecer, the words amanecer, atardecer, and so on. Even in Latin, the names of the star, the names of east and west that we have in Spanish, like Oriente, Occidente, they actually relate to the idea of the sun. Oritur in Latin means to be born, so because the sun is being born. And occidere means to die, because the sun is dying, is going down, is going to disappear, is going to be obliterated out of existence. So in our language, it's so deeply engraved, the idea that the sun is moving, that when we make science with our language, and then it took around like thousands of years to get us rid of the idea that the sun was actually the one moving. It is us, the one that are moving, and we didn't know that. And it took a lot of effort for us to actually get to this point where we realized that that it is us moving and not the sun. The sun is the one like staying. But partially, you could argue that our own language is a trap. It's a trap because the way we represent things with our language can be misleading. It can be misleading. The way things appear to us in general can be misleading, and the way we represent what we see with words can be misleading, especially when we try to talk about science, because science, again, you need language to express science. You cannot, your mind works with your language, and if your language does not represent correctly the reality, it can mislead you into not full error, but into a misrepresentation that will lead you to a false model of reality, which was the case with astronomy and or astronomical models before. So the point is the language. Now, apply this to the way we talk about ourselves, or rather our mental states or emotions or feelings or all these things. This is not objective way to speak about it. First of all, think that not in every language we deal with the same concepts, like the way each cultural language represents certain states of mind is totally different from others. There are definitely things that we have all in common, even across time and space, but one must also recognize that there is evidence that all these words that we have for different emotions or mental states, they are not definitely the same in every culture, which gives you the idea that perhaps they are not universal, and that perhaps it's too subjective the way we reflect all these things. Words such as soul or mind or spirit have changed meaning. Not only are they different in every culture, they also change meaning across time. If you take a look, for example, of the word love, the word love has been meaning different things depending on the culture, depending on the time and the region. So when we, for example, when we translate love, the word, and you see the English word love written as spoken in an epic written, like here the Iliad. So were they trying to represent exactly that emotion, that mental state? The fact is that very likely they were not, and we have certain evidence for that, because we can see the context of those words, and we can actually see that maybe they were not. Maybe they were not meaning what we think they meant, but the words have carried on. We have proof of that, for example, for a word such as soul, or for such as religion, or other words. Like, they have changed across cultures, across even the same word has changed meaning over time. So they are. We have to agree that they are not universal, or the words we have for describing our reality is not universal, and they might be. Eliminativists do not say that their entire language is wrong. They just point out the fact that there are reasons to be suspicious about it, and that our mental states, what we think are our mental states or emotions or feelings or whatever, all these things we think we have, all these words we have to describe the reality of our mind, they are not based on any physical evidence of anything, much as the vocabulary we use to speak about nature is not necessarily scientific, and we mentioned these things about astronomy. Those are the words that we used to describe reality with, but they are not necessarily describing the truth as it is. So it's not that our mind is empty and that there is nothing and that all these things. No, mental states or whatever it is, they are not saying that they do not exist. They are saying that our vocabulary may not be representing that, and we could need something extra. We will need biological or neurological evidence of this kind of these mental states or whatever you want to call it, in order for us to actually know that they exist. And this is, which is exactly what we have demanded from astronomy. Now we have, like, even though we know now that obviously, like, it's us moving and not the sun, we still use words such as sun up or sundown, or we talk about the waxing moon, or we talk about the sun rising, although we know those things are not a reality, they are just our perception of things, but they are useful. So what they call folk psychology, that is the words, the whole vocabulary that we use in each language we use to talk about these mental states or feelings or realities of our mind, they might be useful for our daily lives because more or less we understand each other and it's useful, but we cannot base science upon it. And that has been the tricky point, that usually when we have been trying to do psychology or neurology or other neuropsychology or other types of science based on our mind and character, personality, whatever, we have been using this vocabulary. And the problem is our vocabulary accurate enough as to represent truly those realities? So the point of eliminativism, and that's why it's so important as a science, not as a science, I mean, it's as a philosophy, if you want to call it, as a philosophy, is to make us skeptical. And this is a very important thing. Being skeptical in science is of huge importance, and we need to be skeptical about anything, even if they are not right. Let's say that we find out that all the folk psychology is actually right. Let's say that they are wrong. Still, the fact that they posed the questions and made us stop to rethink all those matters, it was worth it. It was absolutely worth it. Just the fact that they made us stop and rethink all this, it's worth it. So this is not the first time that we are told this. The fact that our language can be a trap has been said many times before. The first one I can think of is Francis Bacon. Francis Bacon already stated in Novum Organum, this huge book, well, not huge, it's actually rather thin. But yeah, like his work, Novum Organum, like the new organ, like the new system, because he was talking about new science. He talks about precisely very early in the book, in the first pages, that our language can be a trap and that we should be suspicious about how our language changes the way we perceive our reality. So we have to be careful with our language because it can be a trap, and we have to be careful when we read or talk about these topics, eliminativism or other currents of philosophy, because it's important to understand what they are really talking about, and they are not talking about the reality or non-reality of things such as love or feelings. They are talking about the way our language represents our mental states. That is folk psychology, like the vocabulary we use to represent our mind. So I think that's all. I think I've made my point rather clearly. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.